Hello there, and today we'll talk about the controversial subject of climate change. Do you think that climate change is real as they say it is, or do you think it's just regular climate changing? Comment in the box below.
The party starts now!
Magic is in the rhythm.
What we're gonna do today is gonna go over basic arguments of the global warming consensus, the climate change deniers, and basic solutions that people have proposed. In addition to that, we'll go over some articles that may disprove the 97% number theory thingy. Now, they're very lopsided with 13,950 peer-reviewed articles along with 198 worldwide science organizations that support this ideology, as opposed to 24 that oppose it. Now, the conservatives are saying that there are ENSO, solar, and volcanic influences that may be contributing to this change, and liberals say it's still going up. Conservatives also say that the Earth's orbit around the Sun might be a contributing factor too. As the Earth goes closer and farther from the Sun, there are climate changes and temperature changes. And the left says that temperatures are increasing even while the Earth is away from the Sun, even though solar irradiance is decreasing. Now, a normal temperature rise by the end of the century would be about 1.5 degrees, but expert research it has about a 99% chance, or it will be going up by 4.5 degrees, at about 92% chance that it will go up by 6.5 degrees. Now, some researchers are saying that the potential for sea level to rise is about 60 meters. If that is correct, that means Florida will be swimming with the dolphins. That'll be due to permafrost melting in Greenland and Canada. The other potential danger of the permafrost melting, they say that there are diseases that are trapped within the ice that will get out. They have an example of a reindeer that was trapped in the middle of a permafrost in Canada, which contained anthrax. Now, this corpse finished decomposing, contaminating some of the plants that some of the other animals ate, causing some disease cases in animals and even some humans. There's also the danger of ocean acidification. As CO2 levels go up, pH levels go down, and 96% of all marine life will die like they did 252 million years ago. That means no fish, no shellfish. This will happen by approximately 2050. Now, one of the big problems with this political ideology is that it doesn't propose any realistic solutions that can be implemented in the near future. One of these solutions would be to take 50% of the military budget and invest it in constructing a hyperloop and planting trees. Sounds pretty good. How are you gonna do it? Now, this is a very heated debate, but not because of what you may think. Climate changes are arguing that there is climate change and global warming. The climate deniers are not denying that there is climate change and global warming. They just don't agree with the consensus that is man-made. And number three, what do these articles really prove? The Earth has climate change, there are cooling periods, there are warming periods. However, it does not support the political ideology. It reminds me of a good example. We have a liberal and a conservative arguing the options pro-choice or pro-life. The liberal says that you have no right to tell a woman what to do with her body. It is her choice. The conservative says, I don't like you killing babies. Liberal says, it's not a baby until it comes out the womb and cries. The conservative says, yes it is. Now, the liberal comes up with an argument of rape. Rape cases amount for less than 1% of all abortions. So therefore, coming up with an argument to support a bigger political agenda based on less than 1% of the cases for this idea. Do you think this is a good comparison or not? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, so this is a press release by the National Association of Scholars. Estimated 40% of scientists doubt man-made global warming. That would bring it down to 60%. Fred Singer said in an interview with the National Association of Scholars that the number of skeptical qualified scientists has been growing steadily. It would guess it is about 40% now. Singer, a leading scientific skeptic of anthropocentric global warming, AGW, is an atmospheric physicist and founder of the Science and Environmental Policy Project, SEPP, an organization that began challenging the published findings of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, in the 1990s. SEPP established the Leipzig Declaration, a statement of dissent from the 1997 Kyoto Protocol that has been signed by over 100 scientists and meteorologists. Asked what he would like to happen in regard to public opinion and policy on climate change, Singer replied, "I would like to see the public look upon global warming as it is just another scientific controversy and oppose any public policies until the major issues are settled, such as the cause. If mostly natural, as NIPCC concludes, then the public policies currently discussed are pointless, hugely expensive, and wasteful of resources that could better be applied to real societal problems." Singer believes that global warming exists, but that human contributions to it are minimal. In the interview, Singer said he believed the efforts in the last 20 years had been successful in disproving the notion that the science is settled. Here's a comment: "Pulling numbers out of thin air is a terrible and odious way to have a debate with both sides of the argument. That 40% number is a falsehood. There is about a 98% consensus of all scientists who study this phenomena that anthropogenic climate change is a reality, and that every major scientific institution in the world supports the conclusion of man-made global warming." So Peter Singer is the professor emeritus of environmental science at the University of Virginia, and he was the founding dean of the School of Environmental and Planetary Sciences at the University of Miami, 1964 to 1967, and a director of the Center for Atmospheric and Space Physics, University of Maryland, 1953-1962. I tend to believe his 40% estimate. What credentials do you have in order to state 98% of scientists agree global warming is man-made? Like that. Let's see what else. "97% consensus on climate change. It's complicated. You may have heard that the assertion that 97% of climate scientists believe that the Earth's climate is warming and human activity is the most likely cause. I made it in the column a couple of months ago, and I learned that it drives some people crazy." Okay. The main problem they seem to have with it is described paper right here in the abstract of 2013 Environmental Research Letters paper, from which it is derived. A cognitive scientist and skeptic of climate skeptics, John Cook of the University of Queensland in Australia. Now George Mason at University of Virginia and 8 co-authors searched the web of science, a database using the terms global warming and global climate change, and then examined the abstract of the 11,944 peer-reviewed papers they found to determine that the position they took on anthropogenic global warming, AGW for short. We find that 66.4% of abstracts express no position on AGW, 32.6% endorse AGW, 0.7% reject AGW, and 0.3% were uncertain about the cause of global warming. Among abstracts expressing a position of AGW, 97.1% endorse the consensus position that humans are causing global warming. AGW. Anthropogenic global warming. What? So if If 60.4% express no position on AGW, how do you get 97.1%? Let's look further. When they counted by authors instead of papers, it was actually 98.4%, but it's the 97% that stuck, thanks in part to a publicity boost from then President Barack Obama. Okay, but hey, what about that 66.4% of papers that didn't express an opinion? This is the part that drives some people crazy. Cook and his co-authors acknowledged that it's a large proportion. They also offered a not unreasonable explanation for it. The result is expected in consensus situations where scientists generally focus their discussions on questions that are still disputed or unanswered rather than on matters about which everyone agrees. That's Oreski's in 07, page 72. This explanation is also consistent with a description of consensus as a spiral trajectory in which initially intense contestation generates rapid settlement and induces a spiral of new questions. Schut and Bierman, 2010. The fundamental science of AGW is no longer controversial among the publishing science community, and the remaining debate on the field has moved to other topics. Still, one cannot know for sure what the authors of those 60.4% of papers were thinking. To their credit, Cook and Co. did try to find out, sending emails to 8,547 authors asking them to self-rate their papers as endorsing or rejecting anthropogenic global warming or taking no stand on it. They got 1,200 responses, and among the 2,242 papers thus rated, a little more than half of those previously classified as no position were judged by their authors endorse AGW. A few were also reclassified as rejecting the consensus, bringing the overall percentages to 62.7% of papers endorsing the consensus, 1.8% rejecting it, and 35.5% with no position. Only 27% of U.S. adults polled by the Pew Research Center last year agreed with the statements that almost all climate scientists agree that human behavior is mostly responsible for climate change. I guess that we can quibble about the exact meaning of almost all. Let's see. Okay, so that tweet from Obama, for example, claimed that 97% of scientists agree that climate change is real, man-made, and dangerous. That's Obama. The Cook paper he was referring to was, of course, focused on just climate scientists, not all scientists. It also made no attempt to discern how dangerous they think climate change is. I also wouldn't be surprised if most scientists do think it's dangerous, but I also imagine there's a much wider and more nuanced range of views about than of the simple question of whether human activity is warming the climate. When it comes to what we should do about climate change, the views surely range even more widely. And in any case, the role of climate scientists in that debate ought to be advisory and not dispositive. When people try to use the 97% figure as a debate ender on climate policy, they're adding political content to a scientific finding. It shouldn't be all that surprising that others when they react politically. The authors looked through the abstracts of 11,944 papers on climate change published from 1991 to 2011 and found only 78.7% that clearly rejected man-made global warming and 40.3% that expressed uncertainty about it. So only 1% of published climate abstracts from 1991 to 2011 explicitly questioned the notion that humans are warming the climate. Geologist James Lawrence Powell did a similar, if less painstaking, examination of the abstracts of 24,210 peer-reviewed climate papers published in 2013 and 2014 and found only 5.021% that, in my judgment, explicitly rejected AGW. See that decline in the percentage? So this is clearly it is not that these scientists support, is 97% of scientists support. It's more complicated than that. It actually just says that there are 99% of climate scientists that don't reject the possibility of whatever AGW, like man-made global warming, but that doesn't mean they agreed. If you remember, there are about 66.4% of papers that didn't express an opinion. Um, so there you go. The 97% soundbite is false.